Hey everybody, it's Mr. Schwartz again, and in this video I'm going to presenting the walkthrough for your classical conditioning assignment number 3, which is labeled Classical Conditioning Worksheet. Should look something like this. What I'm going to do in this video is essentially just walk us through the worksheet. And this is really good practice for your preparation for the classical conditioning quiz. So if you haven't done this assignment yet, stop the recording here and go attempt to do this assignment. Because just watching this video and filling out this worksheet isn't necessarily going to help you nearly as much as if you attempt this worksheet by yourself and then you watch this video in preparation for the quiz. I want this assignment from you, yes, to demonstrate that you completed it. But if all you do is watch this video and then fill it out, I'm going to know based upon your scores on the quiz whether or not you actually learned anything. So again, if you haven't done this assignment, pause this video, go take 10 minutes, 15 minutes to fill out this worksheet, and then come back and watch the rest of this video, and you can double check the answers you got against the answers that I'm going to be recording. Okay. First thing we're going to take a look at is Pavlov's dogs, a scenario that by now you should be familiar with. Dogs naturally salivate when presented with food. When Ivan feeds his dogs, he rings a bell before he prevents the food. Eventually, the dogs begin to salivate when they hear the sound of the bell. Use the words from the word bank, fill in the blanks below. Okay, here are our key vocabulary terms for classical conditioning. Unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. Neutral stimulus, conditioned stimulus, and conditioned response. Remember that the process of classical conditioning is pairing an unconditioned stimulus with a neutral stimulus, resulting in eventually the neutral stimulus becomes the conditioned stimulus and elicits a conditioned response. So, in Pavlov's dog's scenario, before conditioning, food is unconditioned stimulus, which produces the response of salivation naturally, meaning salivation is the unconditioned response. As well, before conditioning, the bell is the neutral stimulus, meaning it doesn't produce much of a response at all, and certainly doesn't produce the response of salivation. During conditioning, the blank is paired with the blank. During conditioning, the food is paired with the bell. You can say food and bell, or if you want to be more technical, you can say that the unconditioned stimulus is paired with the neutral stimulus. And during conditioning, during the period of where learning is taking place, salivation is still the unconditioned response because the dogs are still salivating in response to the food, which is the unconditioned stimulus. After conditioning, when learning has taken place, the bell, which used to be the neutral stimulus, has now become the conditioned stimulus. And salivation, because it is happening in response to the bell, is no longer unconditioned. Because the salivation happens in response to the conditioned stimulus, it has now become the conditioned response. So the unconditioned response has become the conditioned response because The neutral stimulus has become the conditioned stimulus. Okay. Now, let's move on and discuss the same scenario in a slightly different way. This should look familiar because this is that I wanted you to complete for assignment 2, which was called the classical conditioning activity. I put up a video demonstrating myself filling this out according to the Little Albert experiment, and here we're going to do it with Pavlov's dogs. Use the words from the word blank to fill in the chart below. The number next to each word tells you how many times it is used in the chart. And here are 3 words: food, salivation, and bell, corresponding to unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, neutral stimulus, conditioned stimulus, and conditioned response. For conditioning, the unconditioned stimulus, food, produces the unconditioned response, salivation. Before conditioning, the neutral stimulus, bell, produces no response, certainly not salivation. During conditioning, the unconditioned stimulus, food, is paired with the neutral stimulus, bell, and produces the unconditioned response of salivation. Remember, salivation during conditioning is still an unconditioned response because it is happening in response to the food. It's only after conditioning we remove the food, and what we have left is the bell producing salivation, meaning the bell has become the conditioned stimulus, and the salivation is now considered the conditioned response because it happens in response to the bell. Okay, now back to Little video. Now here we're going to do kind of unpack the language backwards. Little Albert happily played with toys and animals. The experimenters then banged a hammer against the metal pipe while little Albert played with a white rat, startling Albert and making him cry. Eventually, Albert became frightened and started to cry when he was presented with the white rat, even when there was no loud noise to startle. Use the words from the word to fill in the chart below. The number next to each word tells you how many times it is used in the chart. Here are our words: loud noise, white rat, and fear, crying. Before conditioning, what is the unconditioned stimulus? People often say the white rat because that's what happens first. But the unconditioned stimulus is the one that produces the natural response. The natural response to the loud noise is fear and crying. Remember, I'm saying natural response, not neutral. Natural. So before conditioning, the loud noise is the unconditioned stimulus, and fear and crying is the unconditioned response. The neutral stimulus in this scenario is the white rat. Again, Albert may respond to the rat, but he doesn't respond with fear and crying, startling like somebody just banged on a metal pipe with a hammer. That's what happens during conditioning. During conditioning, remember, the unconditioned stimulus is paired with the neutral stimulus, meaning the loud noise is paired with the white rat. But the fear response is still the conditioned, or rather, I'm sorry, during conditioning, the fear response is still unconditioned. It hasn't yet been learned. It's still natural. So the fear response here is still being caused by the loud noise. It's only conditioning that the white rat has become the conditioned stimulus, producing the fear response, meaning that the fear and crying has now become the conditioned response because it occurs in response to the conditioned stimulus. After conditioning, the white rat has become the conditioned stimulus. Fear and crying has now become the conditioned response. Okay, let's do one more scenario where we're going to put it all together. I'll see if I can get this done in the next 5 minutes. Sometimes, remember, these classical conditioning scenarios occurred over many, many exposures. The dogs didn't learn to associate the bell with the food right away. It took many times of pairing the bell with the food, pairing the bell with the food, just like little Albert pairing the white rat with the loud noise. Eventually, Albert learned to fear the white rat. But sometimes this type of learning can happen in only one exposure if the experience is significantly traumatic. The first time that Mia got stung by a bee, she was standing in a field of white flowers. And this was really tough for her. Now, whenever Mia sees a white flower, she winces in pain as if she's just been stung, almost like she's bracing for a bee sting every time she sees a white flower. So what I want you to do is put together the entire story using all of the vocab. So the key terms and then the specific elements from this example. You can write out your answer, or you can draw a diagram. Do it. Either way is fine with me. Okay. Now, I'm not going to actually type this out here because I don't want to do too much of the work for you. But keep this in mind as you go through it. It's natural to respond to a bee sting by wincing in pain. It's not natural to respond to a white flower by wincing as if you're in pain. It's only if you learn to associate the bee sting with the white flower that the white flower would cause you to wince in pain. And that's the scenario we're looking at. Identify the unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response. Identify the neutral stimulus. Identify the conditioning phase during which the unconditioned stimulus is paired with the neutral stimulus. And then explain how the formerly neutral stimulus has now become the conditioned stimulus. The former unconditioned response has now become the conditioned. Okay, so I'll write that out. Unconditioned stimulus produces unconditioned response. This video is going to run out at 15 and I'm at 13:20. Let's see if I can do it. Neutral stimulus produces no response. When unconditioned stimulus, neutral stimulus, unconditioned neutral stimulus comes conditioned stimulus, and unconditioned response comes conditioned response when it occurs in response to the conditioned. Okay? But what I want you to do is explain what's what in this scenario. What's the unconditioned stimulus? What becomes the conditioned response? Okay? Now, again, this is all really good preparation for your classical conditioning quiz. So think of this as practice. This is stuff that you need to practice if you want to be successful on the quiz. I encourage you to do so, and as always, let me know if you have any concerns. Mr. Schwartz42 @gmail.com. Take care, everybody. See you soon.